President Jacob Zuma made two important announcements today. The first was the SABC Board, and the second, more serious one, was another cabinet reshuffle in 2017. News 24 Editor-in-Chief Adrian Besson is here to unpack and explain some of the moves and the implications thereof. Adrian, let's start with the cabinet reshuffle. What are the big news items here and why?
Matthew, I mean, this is extraordinary. This was President Zuma's 12th reshuffle in his term as president. He's been in office for how long now? 8 years as state president. 12 reshuffles, that's quite something. This one, like some previous reshuffles, kind of leaves one wondering why this happened. And it's left to people like us to speculate. Now let's look at this reshuffle. The main story of the reshuffle is the axing of Zuma, Zuma's old comrade from KwaZulu-Natal and the SACP leader as Minister of Higher Education. This comes as a shock. Nzimande has been by Zuma's side for many years, but in recent months the SACP has obviously turned on Zuma and is now actively campaigning for him to be unseated as ANC president and to be recalled. But you know, this is the end of a long relationship or bromance, as I called it in my piece earlier today, between Nzimande and Zuma. You'll remember that Nzimande was one of the fiercest campaigners for Zuma to become ANC president in Polokwane in 2007. He was by Zuma's side asking for the National Prosecuting Authority to drop their charges of corruption against Zuma, which was in the news on Friday, just a few days ago. So it's quite ironic that it ended like this for Nzimande, but not unexpectedly so. And the axing of Nzimande at this time, a few months before the ANC's Nazaré conference in December, gives you some indication of the level of panic that Zuma is experiencing. He's clearly backing Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma to succeed him, his former wife and the former chairperson of the Africa Union Commission. And things are not going that well with her campaign, so this must be seen in that context. What has he achieved by sacking Nzimande? Well, a few positions have now opened up and he moved some musical chairs around. So he literally shifted the number of ministers who's only been in their positions for, 4 or 5 months since the last reshuffle into new positions. This is classical Zuma, this is strategy at work, and trying to understand it is not always that clear and logical. But it was clearly, about Nzimande, getting him out, making space to reshuffle, and then the most important move, I would argue, is moving David Mahlobo from intelligence to energy.
So you talk about basically the classical musical chairs that the president is now, as you said, so good at doing, and the idea of creating chaos amongst the pigeons, like, what does it mean for other ministers or deputy ministers who might be SACP members?
Well, President Zuma thrives on instability, it seems, and disruption and chaos. And that's not good for South Africa, obviously, for our stability. It's not good for the market, it's not good for the rand, and just for the general sake of our country. But this is President Jacob Zuma's way to say, I'm still in charge. I can reshuffle my cabinet whenever I want to. I can appoint the chairperson of the SABC who I want to be, even if there's questions about this person. And this is a president going into the last 2 months of his term as ANC president, knowing that his power is slipping away, trying to prove, that he's still the chief. So I think, this is red flags going up for me here. The fact that Zuma is still at this very late stage is making such dramatic moves and disrupting, a department like Home Affairs that's really just kind of become stable again with Lingiwe Mkhize as minister, has now got a new minister for not any sensible reason. There's nothing specifically wrong that Lingiwe Mkhize has done that we know about. So again, I think a lot of this has to do with nuclear, as I argued in my column, specifically David Mahlobo's appointment, and then with the ANC's conference in December.
Interestingly, last week they announced that they're changing the preferred nuclear site from Toonspunt in St. Francis Bay area to near Koeberg. And they're seeing that could speed up slightly the nuclear process. What is it about David Mahlobo that's so interesting as the new energy minister?
Well, we must talk about nuclear, Matthew. You've also written a lot about it. I mean, you have a lot of knowledge about the process so far. For the life of me, I cannot see how Jacob Zuma thinks he will get this through. It's just plainly unaffordable for our country to buy nuclear from Russia. But you know, a few things make sense now. Pravin Gordhan always says we must connect the dots. So a few things are starting to make sense now. What are these things? David Mahlobo, who was the Minister of Intelligence until a few hours ago, traveled with Jacob Zuma to Russia. What was it, about 2 years ago or so?
2014, December.
2014, 3 years ago. To see President Vladimir Putin. Now, this was the famous trip during which Zuma apparently received medical help from Putin to get poison out of his system, which was allegedly been poisoned by one of his wives. Zuma then went to visit Putin to talk about trade, it was said at the time, but he only took with him David Mahlobo, the Minister of Intelligence, and Nomaindi Mfeketo, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. This was always bizarre, always very mysterious. Why would the Minister of Intelligence go to Russia? At the time, negotiations about nuclear was already ongoing. We know that because Tina Joemat-Pettersson, who was then the Minister of Energy, was already signing deals with Russia at international nuclear conferences. So definitely, you know, it makes sense now that Mahlobo was probably in that very inner circle when Zuma and Putin were discussing the nuclear deal. The setback has been huge for the government. The Western Cape High Court's judgment a few months ago that set aside the nuclear process has been huge, and Zuma's been upset by this. He brought in Mamuleke Kubai to try and sort out the process as Minister of Energy. She's now been moved out. She's now the new Minister of Communications, and the new Minister of Energy is now David Mahlobo from Intelligence. Mahlobo also recently, I think a week or two, implicated in the Sunday Times newspaper as having traveled to Russia with Zuma's two new best friends, Kenny Kunene and Gayton McKenzie, apparently, the two former convicts who are now in the middle of negotiating some kind of gas deal. So all these things very murky, very concerning, and you know, if this is the speed at which Zuma is moving towards December, we should be on red alert.
The nuclear thing is an interesting one because obviously there have been allegations that money could have changed hands, that there's some secret deal, and the Russians are impatient and that they want to see something. But there's been no evidence, there's been no proof of this. It's been this weird elephant in the room that no one's really been able to clearly identify or handle. What's going to happen next? I mean, now you've got the intelligence minister coming into energy. It's a very peculiar move. You know, what next?
Look, what we know for a fact, I agree with you, there's no concrete proof or evidence at this stage that some money has been paid by Russia to whether it's Zuma or any other officials in South Africa. What we do know, however, is that President Zuma's son, Duduzane Zuma, is a shareholder of Shiva Uranium and the Guptas, the uranium mine owned by the Guptas in the northwest. Now, this mine will obviously benefit from us having nuclear power. So, I mean, that is a fact. So there's absolutely no doubt that it will be in Zuma and his family's favor and financial favor if we indeed procure nuclear. But as you well know, the energy mix has drastically changed the landscape. We don't necessarily need nuclear anymore. So it does look that, you know, this program is being driven through against all reason and logic, and one must ask why. But Matthew, I still struggle to see how even David Mahlobo, with all his spy networks and intelligence you know, experience from the past few years, will be able to drive through this massively controversial project.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is one of those things that South Africans also don't really understand. I mean, Eskom, I think people are starting to understand Transnet denial, and obviously the parliamentary inquiry that goes into that now, it will uncover that. But when it comes to nuclear, it's all one big mystery and speculation. And I think having an intelligence minister move into this role, especially because he travelled with President Zuma on this very peculiar trip that's shrouded in mystery.
Yeah,
it certainly does ask a lot of questions.
Absolutely, and we're being forced to speculate, Matthew. Let's be honest. None of us know why Zuma made this. None of us know what Mahlobo's brief is. But President Zuma simply doesn't take South Africans into his confidence, not even his own party, the ANC, into his confidence to explain why he's reshuffling his cabinet every few months or so. We've just heard from Gwede Mantashe, the Secretary General, that the party was merely informed again of the cabinet reshuffle, as happened in March, when the party, when the big reshuffle happened that saw Pravin Gordhan being axed. So this tells you something. This tells you something about a president who gets his briefs from somewhere else. This tells you something about a president who's running a parallel state, who's using his position to make decisions and to move people around, not because it's in the best interest of the country or even the decision of the ANC, but to serve some other kind of powers. What we know is that President Zuma is very close to the Gupta family. We know that his son is a chief beneficiary of the Gupta family's capture of the state. So these things are all very murky, it's all very dangerous. Blatant Zimande is now out, the communists are furious. Until now, the Communist Party has actively asked for Zuma to go, but one can expect that drive to go into overdrive now, or that campaign to go into overdrive. And until President Zuma takes South Africans into his confidence, until he sees himself as accountable to the people of South Africa, we'll be forced to speculate about these things.
Let's talk about the succession race. Now, everyone's asking, why is Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma not a cabinet minister?
That is very interesting. I mean, I expected her as well to be included in cabinet, just because that gives you the infrastructure to move around. As a minister, this is all very cynical stuff. But as a minister, you have certain privileges in terms of bodyguards, in terms of police protection when you move around. We're seeing some ministers at the moment, people like Lindiwe Sisulu and even Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, going on all these, going to all the provinces as in their official capacities, but they're obviously also campaigning at the same time. So there's two schools of thoughts on this, and I don't necessarily prefer either of them. The first is that Zuma has dropped his ex-wife Dlamini-Zuma as candidate, that he also believes she's not going to make it and get the numbers to beat either Cyril Ramaphosa or Zweli Mkhize, who's really coming through strong as a third-way candidate. And that Zuma is throwing in his lot probably with Mkhize. He knows him much better, he trusts him, he's got a long-standing relationship with him. Mkhize recently called Zuma his older brother. He sees him as someone who's like an older brother to him. That's the one school of thought, so that Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma is out. She's no longer the preferred candidate for the Zuma camp. The second school of thought is that Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma may actually have been constrained by becoming a cabinet minister from campaigning. That becoming a new minister with a new portfolio would have required her to settle in, to get briefings from DGs, to get up to speed with a policy. There's a medium-term budget coming up next week, so there's a lot of admin around that job. She wouldn't have just been able to get back on the campaign trail as she's doing at the moment. So I don't know. I mean, I don't particularly have knowledge that says either of those scenarios are true. There's definitely still a lot of campaigning going on for Dlamini-Zuma. And Zuma's probably playing his cards cleverly. He's probably, if there's going to be more than 2 candidates in December, he probably wants to go in backing at least 2 horses, that he knows he could get what he wants to. So this does, again, I think, strengthen the hand of the Ramaphosa campaign. SACP Kusatu, who's thrown in their lot to say, look, President Zuma is an absolute disaster. He cannot continue to rule, and we must definitely not support his candidate. But who that other candidate is going to be is the interesting question.
So we've got this national development plan. It's all about creating jobs and reducing inequality and increasing GDP. How effective has this cabinet reshuffle been in achieving that goal?
Matthew, you can answer that question yourself. I mean, this has got nothing to do with the NDP. This is all politics. This is desperate politics of a strongman president that's trying to hold on. And Ferial Haffajee, the editor-at-large of Huffington Post, wrote earlier today that Zuma has gone rogue. And I think she's right. I think he's gone rogue a while ago already. But this is more proof, that the president is making these moves not in the best interest of anyone, not in the best interest of the country, of the people of the country, of anti-poverty plans, of defeating white economic capital, or of then supporting the National Development Plan, which is supposedly still our blueprint. This is about Jacob Zuma, his own survival, his own interest, the interest of his family and his friends.
So then, looking at the SABC board, for example, the communications minister being moved out of her role there, how does that all link up with the changes at SABC?
So that was interesting. This morning, before the cabinet reshuffle, we got another press statement from the presidency announcing the confirmation of the SABC board. Now you'll remember that it took Zuma a while to confirm this board, and what we heard that he was quite annoyed with Ayanda Dlodlo, who was only appointed as Minister of Communications in April during that after the night of the long knives where Pravin Gordhan was fired. Tlotlo only had a few months to get things fixed at the SABC. That was really in a terrible spot. And I think she did quite well. I think the interim board really did their job well. And the chairperson, Kanisile Kweyama, and Matata Tsedu, the deputy chair of the SABC board, made the right move, started cleaning up the public broadcaster, and things were going in a good direction. The ANC in Parliament and the other opposition then put forward these new names for the board, which Zuma was seemingly unhappy with.
So that was obviously the interim board that you were speaking about earlier. So now we still need Zuma to kind of finalise it.
So the president, in terms of the SABC Act, has to confirm the board. And this morning he announced that he's now confirmed this board, which he seemingly didn't agree with, but he picked 2 other people to lead the board. And the chairperson is now Bongumuso Makatini, and the deputy chairperson is Phoebe Potgieter Kubulu. And this is very interesting because, you know, if you can just do a few Google search just to show you that Mr. Makatini is also the chairperson of the Bongi Ngema Zuma Foundation. So he chairs the foundation of one of President Zuma's wives.
And now he's obviously said he's going to step down from that. But still, I mean, it's,
yes,
you know, where does he come from?
There's clearly a friendship there. There's a relationship a personal relationship between Mr. Makatini and the Zumas. And Potgieter Kubule is in the running for the NEC of the ANC and is a very close campaigner of Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Oh, wow. So President Zuma has again made his moves there. He picked the 2 people who's closest to him, who he could probably try to influence. Very cynical move again, you know. By all accounts, Kweyama and Tsedu were doing a great job steering the SABC board in the right direction. They are still part of the SABC board, but the board's now being led by 2 people much closer to Jacob Zuma.
If the board is strong but is led by 2 people chosen specifically by the president, what can we expect the SABC to still correct itself in the right ways, or can those 2 leaders put the president's directives into action?
Unfortunately, looking at recent history, the SABC board has not been a good story. You know, it's been split. It's been rife with tension between different factions, and unfortunately, this move seems to be entrenching a new faction between the chair and the deputy chair and the rest of the board, and this just spells trouble for me. This spells trouble when people like Claudia Motswaneng or others try to do things, or when the SABC has to take decisions in terms of court cases involving those people close to the president. They may be split again on the board. So this appointment has done nothing to improve the stability, the smooth sailing, the governance of the SABC, especially 2-3 months before the ANC's election in Nasrec.
After everything Parliament went through, after that entire inquiry into SABC, it's just like full circle.
Zuma gets what Zuma wants.
And when you look at it from that angle, I mean, what can you expect from the Eskom/Transnet/Denel inquiry in Parliament?
Well, you were there this morning, so you can tell us what happened. I think that you know, it's obviously interesting that Pravin Gordhan is now a normal MP sitting there for the ANC. He will probably take on a role almost as a prosecutor, you know, in this hearings. He will have a lot of questions. He's now become a scholar of state capture. So it's good that these things are aired. But it's still up to the executive to make the calls.
Yeah.
We've now got a new energy minister who oversees Eskom. So
well, actually, the Public Enterprises Minister, Lynn Brown, is actually still in her role.
Yes, indeed.
With Eskom underneath her, but certainly the new energy minister has a lot of influence over Eskom there.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting how that plays out, and I think Lynn Brown's got I think she's looking forward to answering questions of allegations against herself as well in that thing. And from Pravin Gordhan's side, I think he has a lot of background from a finance perspective, from a treasury perspective. So we'll, I think, bring a lot of that knowledge and those kind of questions to it. But yeah, today was an exciting start to it. It started with a book that's been developed by academics around Eskom specifically, and looking at the full history since around 2010, very much in Zuma's administration, looking at board changes, minister changes, and how there's been a depletion of governance and at Eskom. So there are a lot of questions that need to be answered, and it's going to be a very lengthy and difficult process. But what is it going to accomplish if you know, if the SABC inquiry accomplished
Yes.
so much of getting rid of the rot of SABC, now to put in 2 new leaders to restart that whole process again.
Yes.
It doesn't make any logical sense, obviously. But I mean, you know, how does the country respond?
Well, the country, you know, has a number of options.
As if it's one person.
So, yeah, well, of course, but civil society has been very active. You know, I mean, even in this inquiry today that started in Parliament, there's a lot of civil society academics involved in studying state capture and speaking out. There's a lot of civil society organizations going to court, actively initiating litigation against these things. The pressure must just be kept up. You know, we mustn't let go. Us in the media must keep on writing about these things. And then the ANC in December has the decision. They've got an opportunity to make certain choices about the future of not only the party but also of the country. And of course, the country as a whole goes to the polls in 2019, probably around the middle of 2019, when every South African has another chance to make his or her vote count. But yes, let's see what happens on the road to December. If this is a sign of things to come, there may still be more reshuffles and more drama before we get to Nasrec on the 16th of December.
I look forward to getting your push alert, Adrian.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you. Thanks very much for watching.